Tonight we're looking at finding the light at the end of the tunnel. How do we solve a problem like Eskom and climb out of the economic woes that load shedding has caused? South Africa has been subjected to load shedding almost every day since the beginning of the last quarter of last year, with stage 6 rolling blackouts implemented for the longest time in history this year. And South Africa's potential in so many other areas, tourism, manufacturing, mining, is being affected as a result. Before I introduce our esteemed panel, let's look at the myriad of reasons that we've been told are the reasons that we're in this mess. And of course, writing in his weekly newsletter this week, the president said that load shedding was a result of a perfect storm of various factors. That is indeed the case. Let's look at some of those factors and then we'll address some of these missteps or problems and look at a way forward. So reasons for rolling blackouts: no new generating capacity in recent years, even since 2018. Given the extreme focus on rolling blackouts, the woes that we've had to endure, no major generating capacity has in fact been added. The debate over baseload versus renewable energy, that is becoming somewhat of an ideological debate. Political sides are forming. Government, of course, ignoring warnings. This came up again today in Parliament as far back as 1998. Years later, we started building Medupi and Kusile, failures around those two very key coal power stations. Mismanagement, state capture, that has been, of course, ventilated through the Zondo Commission. Old power stations, our energy availability factor, and this is spoken of increasingly, the EAF, very low for the stations that we have, the power stations, despite all of Eskom's maintenance efforts. And then, of course, red tape and individuals and companies not feeding onto the grid, into the grid. And this was a huge opportunity spoken about years ago. Government and Eskom still talking about the potential for solar panels, people with solar panels, companies, think of shopping centers with solar panels on their roofs, feeding into the grid. So what are the solutions and what are the alternatives going forward? To discuss, we're now joined by development finance specialist Jose Maleshe, the CEO of Business Unity South Africa, Kaz Kavadia. We have energy economist Lungile Mashele and the CEO of the Energy Intensive Users Group, Fanele Mondi. And let me start with all of you. Let's open it up, and I'd like to gauge your optimism or pessimism around load shedding. Let me start with you, Jose. Do you think we will see light at the end of this, and what sort of time frame are you looking at? And if you had to look at one of those issues, what would you address first?
Good evening to the viewers, and good evening to you, Francis, as well. Are we going to, is there anyone who can put their head in the block and provide timelines in this kind of a situation, which is so dynamic? I doubt it. But we are, I think, encouraged a little bit by what Eskom is telling us in terms of them focusing as a top priority on helping fix the coal-fired power plants that have been having problems of intermittency themselves. So we see that as one of their solutions. I think that the fact that finally National Treasury was coming to the table in terms of helping with the debt that Eskom has and looking at the at least strengthening Eskom's balance sheet is one of the positive things that are happening. But I would not put a timeline to this, because we've had many plans before, and these plans have changed from time to time. The only encouraging thing, again, from Eskom's perspective, is that at least they are putting, the board is putting their neck on the block by giving us specific, call it objectives and timelines in terms of the energy availability factor. They are putting their neck on the block. They are summoning support from a project management company to help them address the issues in terms of outages of the plants, to do reliability maintenance. That is encouraging, given where we've been and how how bleak things have been.
Yes, surely the energy availability factor is one of the few things that is actually in Eskom's power. There are other things, other moving parts. Kaz, tell me if you agree. And are you willing to put a time frame, a potential time frame down, given what you're seeing?
Well, and thanks for the invitation, and hi to your viewers. Look, I mean, we've been quite clear in public about this, and you know, at the risk of repetition, because interviews happen far more often than progress in this area, so one tends to repeat things. We had supported the President's energy plan. That plan is essentially a 2 to 3 year plan if we start implementing immediately. It's quite clear, and we must be frank about this. Load shedding is not going away anytime soon. But if we implement the President's plan, if we open up the energy sector far more efficiently and effectively to the private sector, we've seen that in the embedded energy area, when the ceiling was lifted from 10 to 100 megawatts, we had significant investment in the embedded energy area from the private sector. If we speed up renewables, if we continue, the ceiling has now been lifted on embedded energy, and if we continue creating an environment for private sector investment in the energy area, we will actually begin to diversify the energy environment. We also believe that there are some short-term measures we can put into place. The one is the whole question about diesel. We believe that in the short term, diesel will be necessary, and Eskom needs to be empowered to actually utilize diesel, and Treasury should be finding money to do that. We believe that Eskom should urgently secure whatever excess energy there is in the private sector and utilize that. We also believe that we should incentivize the residential and commercial installation of solar panels and geysers. That will reduce pressure on the grid. And we believe that Eskom leadership needs to utilize all of these immediate measures, which can have some sort of impact in the next couple of months on load shedding, and communicate these effectively to the public. So there's some immediate stuff to be done, but we need to implement the President's plan urgently so that in the next 3 years or so, we can have a significant impact on energy production, because of the involvement of the private sector, and we can have a significant impact on load shedding over that period of time.
And we'll come back to incentivization. I mean, PwC said last year, if you put solar panels on commercial and industrial properties just in Midrand, you could reduce load shedding in this country by one stage. So, Fanele, maybe you'd like to pick up on that. I guess business would love to be able to make money while feeding into the grid, but we need to come up with the feed-in tariff. And are you also looking at 2 to 3 years? Business, the big users that you represent, surely want some sort of certainty.
Good evening, Francis, and your viewers. I think at the risk of repeating ourselves, I think the President's plan is quite sound and robust. The real issue is about implementation. It's about the swift implementation of that plan. It's the speed which we are lacking. Coming to the timeframes, I think Jose already indicated it's really difficult to do that. But my sense is that yes, 2 to 3 years is a reasonable time to get out of the problems we're in. But in the meantime, we certainly cannot survive with these high levels of interruptions. So there is an urgent need to start reducing the load sharing stages. And part of it is what Kaz has covered, the provision of diesel, the acceleration of maintenance, the acceleration of demand side management. Those are fairly quick wins, really. There are other longer-term issues, but we need to start acting on them as well. For instance, there is a whole lot of work which has been done on the supply side, both from a public point of view, that is the public procurement by DMRE, as well as private sector, based on the feedback which the NECOM has presented. I mean, we could see about 1,600 plus minus of private generation this year alone, with another 9,000 coming in. So there is hope, going forward. I think, that's where I'll leave it for now.
All right, and we'll come back to you. But Lungile, I mean, we heard about this plan. So both the gentlemen representing business and sometimes big business saying that plan is good, but it's about the speed at which it's implemented. We heard a lot about that over the weekend. Again, an update. So at least government not presenting a new plan, but an update. How hopeful are you feeling after that?
So this weekend, especially after Eskom spoke on Sunday, I have renewed confidence in their abilities and in what they promised to do. And as Kusa said, I think one of the key things that has been lacking in any plan that we've been given so far, or any round of documents, is that for the first time they're putting their heads on the block and they are saying by 2023 June, this is where we want to be. By 2024, this is where we will be. And by 2025, we will have a 70% EAF. The last time we saw a 70% EAF was about 5-6 years ago. So that would be a massive improvement. And, if I may just say, we are currently on a 50.4% EAF. Just a 10% improvement on EAF means that we do not have to endure at least 4 stages of load shedding. So it is of absolute importance that Eskom focuses on improving EAF. This is by looking at their fleet. This is by looking at reliability maintenance, making sure that it is done on speed and on time, that it is done accurately, as opposed to the maintenance we've been seeing these last couple of years, where with their own admission that in 3 weeks or in 3 months, there are breakdowns that they experience again. But based on what they said, coupled with the fact that government did say that they will be looking at taking a significant portion of Eskom debt, anything between 1/3 to 2/3, as well as the 18.65% tariff increase that they were granted 2 weeks ago. I'm hoping that that combination of factors would mean that they live up to their promise that by the 31st of March, 2025, we would have reduced load shedding or ended it for a period of time at least.
And Jose, let me come to you again on this, because there was some debate in Parliament today, Eskom saying it's in this situation because of history. Scope is saying, no, give us timelines. How are we going to get out of this? But some things are out of Eskom's hands, new generating capacity, for example. But the if the amount of output that each coal power station can give surely is in Eskom's hands to some extent, even though they are old and they're failing. Have you been disappointed that despite this huge maintenance drive for years, that is pretty low? They're now giving timeframes to fix it, but it's been incredibly low. So we've seen the biggest maintenance drive and then the lowest available energy factor in years.
Yes, it's been disappointing that in terms of the reliability maintenance that was planned about 3 years ago, the intention was to focus on it, and it has not been done according to plan. Obviously, that is disappointing. And it's, in terms of where we are going, it's very, very difficult to keep on focusing on the past, because the past is not going to give us any progress. We are supposed to be focusing on what we can do. The reason why we keep on finding ourselves here is because we keep rehashing the past and not focusing on the interventions. I mean, this intervention that relates to Eskom's balance sheet is coming in now. The pronouncement will be in February. There's been calls many years ago to deal with that. There's been calls many years ago to say, let's deal with the coal fleet that is working. Eskom was telling us in their briefing that internal controls within Eskom are a challenge, and that is within Eskom's sphere. Managing stocks is not something that is new. It's an international norm where you manage stocks and make sure that they are available when the breakdowns happen. That has not been the case within Eskom. So I would advise that with respect to Eskom, yes, there are other role players. That is important to focus on what is within your sphere of control so that you can make improvements there and let the other role players do what is supposed to be within that sphere of control, like the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy. We haven't even mentioned the transmission infrastructure. We mentioned here that the private sector will come in, but private sector is going to need to connect that generation capacity to transmission infrastructure. And that is lagging behind. We know that the Renewable Energy IPP procurement program was doubled for round 6, but we only announced a few of the bidders. Why? Because we cannot connect them to the grid, because we have issues with respect to private sector, and we need to work together and make sure that I have a cohesive plan going forward.
All right, Cass, and we have to be a little bit quicker. Let's speed this up and go around. Very quickly, when it comes to the private sector and renewables, there is something of a debate going on, the baseload versus renewables. Gwede Mantashe, the minister, has used the word liberals in relation to people who want renewables, and there are concerns that business interests, this is coming up again and again, business interests, people with vested interests in renewables are pushing that. What's the truth in that?
Well, it's not the first tranche of renewables that we have on the market. We've had numerous tranches of renewables in which South African and global businesses have invested and that have gone onto the grid and have helped us manage our energy situation. Of course, business will push for renewables because it's an investment opportunity for business, but it's not pushing for renewables simply as an investment opportunity. The bottom line is that we have actually made significant commitments to decarbonize, to move towards clean energy, to move toward the green economy in the next decade or so. And we're going to have to meet those commitments. And renewables is one way of actually doing that. But also renewables is one way of actually diversifying our energy mix and getting different forms of energy onto the grid and reducing dependency on coal, which is a form of energy that is losing popularity across the world. And it's just a scientific fact that coal creates more emissions, and as a result of that, we are a significant emitter, and we have to deal with that. So, renewables, it's not just private sector pushing this because business wants to get involved. The bottom line is that without the involvement of business in energy generation, we're not going to sort out our energy problem. Eskom is not going to sort it out. And that's the bottom line.
And thank you. I thought it was important to really pick up on that. Fanele and Lungile, sorry to cut your time short. We have run out, but I'd like to just pose the same question to both of you. SONA is coming up. The budget is coming up. What's the low-hanging fruit? What do you want to hear from government as we move forward? Very quickly, Fanele.
I think the first one is what the government has already said, to say we need to improve the balance sheet of Eskom. So that is absolutely crucial. We know the situation about the Eskom finances. The second one, I think it's really about providing incentives, funding this energy plan, because we will realize that not all of these are easily done from an economic point of view. We need to find economically viable solutions. I think for me, those are the two key things.
Lungile, last word goes to you.
So I would certainly say incentivizing residential customers, looking at tax breaks for those who are willing to install certain equipment, also funding of a demand-side management program. In 2008, 2009, there was a demand-side management program that was run by the Eskom, looking at changing of light bulbs, solar water heaters, that helped us save over 4,000 megawatts. So that's an avenue we can certainly look at. Looking at incentivizing small business owners, especially during this load shedding crisis, SMEs, with maybe generators and diesel vouchers, for instance, because they are the hardest hit in terms of what is happening. In terms of Eskom, it's very simple. You take a significant portion of their debt, you make them more sustainable, they're able to run maintenance, they're able to improve EAF, and we end up having less load shedding going forward.
All right, thank you so much. And I mean, there's the example of Vietnam. A feed-in tariff was so incentivizing to individuals and companies that they had a surplus. People have been told to switch off their solar panels and stop feeding into the grid. Thank you to all of you. That was Development Finance Specialist Jose Maleshe, the CEO of Business Unity South Africa, Kaz Kavadia, Energy Economist Lungile Mashele, and the CEO of the Energy Intensive Users Group, Fanele Mondi. And we're looking tonight as to the way forward. We know how we got here. We laid out the various missteps that have been made, but some of them feeling more optimistic after the weekend's rhetoric about where we are going.